Thank you. Well, good evening. I hope you're able to join us this evening for Wise Up. This is Thursday, May the 28th, and I have three very special guests, James and Hannah Shank. And I got their names right this time, but I won't guarantee that because I've known Hannah for a long time by her maiden name. So occasionally I might throw that in. And then we have another guest, Abby Russell, my daughter. And of course, I've known her for a long time too. And the reason that I asked three young people to join us this evening is really twofold. I wanted to get their perspective on things going on with regard to the coronavirus, but then also all three of them have some pretty interesting journeys that they are planning to undertake in the not too distant future. And I wanted them to share about those things, how the Lord has been preparing them and leading them up to this moment. So first, if you would just give us a little introduction to yourself. James, if you want to start, just like where you're from and what you've been doing school-wise and so forth.
Yeah, so my name's James. I'm Hannah's husband. I am from Northern Virginia. Hannah and I, we got married last May, so it has been a year, which is kind of crazy. And during our first year of marriage, we lived in Lynchburg because we both went to Liberty. So I went there and graduated back in 2017. I studied youth ministry, and I took a gap year. And then after that gap year, I started seminary. So this past May, I just finished up my second year in their seminary program. And so, yeah, we lived in Lynchburg. I worked at Liberty this past year as well. And now we're here.
So James, why did you choose Liberty?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Liberty was the last school I didn't even really want to apply. I didn't really know that I applied. I filled out an application to get a free t-shirt, and they contacted me back, and it was the only school that I applied to because I was just planning on going to a community college at that point, and ended up saying yes, I'd like to go, and didn't really know what I wanted to study when I got there, but I had a lot of really good friends in the youth ministry program, and I was at a really solid church during my undergrad, and really got me interested in it. So that's why I wanted to study that as well.
Now, some people watching our program tonight may not be familiar with Liberty, but it's in Lynchburg, Virginia, and it is probably the world's largest Christian university because now they do have a large campus there with a lot of on-campus students, but also they have an enormous number of distance learning students from around the world. So that's what makes it the world's largest Christian university. And Hannah, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up at Liberty.
Okay, so I was born and raised in Blountville, Tennessee. I've been at Celebration for almost my whole life. So been there when they were meeting at Central High School and at Meadowview, and now in our church building. I decided to go to Liberty after graduating from Central. I knew that I just wanted a solid Christian education because going to public school my whole life, I don't know, I knew from a young age that I wanted to do something in missions. And so I chose Liberty hoping to get that kind of those Bible classes, things like that I never got in public school. And I ended up choosing to study elementary education. So just graduated this last May, kind of graduated, I guess, in a way, and got my undergrad in elementary education with a science focus. And I met James, I guess I was a sophomore and he was a senior, and we lived on the same dorm. So we met that way and we got married and here we are.
And James, you might have said what your undergraduate major is, but I don't know if I caught it.
Yeah, it's in youth ministry.
Youth ministry. And the degree you've been working on in the seminary is?
It's a Master's of Divinity in Leadership.
Okay. And then Abby, tell us a little bit about your most recent days from college and so forth.
Yes, so I just finished my junior year. I've been at Milligan College studying business and humanities, and I know that you've mentioned a few times in your sermons that you had been in Northern Ireland visiting me. And so most people know at this point, I was in Northern Ireland this past semester, and it was a really, really neat opportunity, something that I'm really grateful for. And it had just been like a dream to get to do something like that. But all the classes there worked my humanities major. So I was studying peacemaking and reconciliation and follow up from the troubles that happened there, mainly in the 1970s. And so that was a semester that was really different that I'm really grateful for. It did get cut short, but it was just such a sweet time. A lot of new things I got to do. And so I'm really grateful for that, but I still have one more year at Milligan, and I'm really praying how God's going to use me there and how I'm supposed to kind of continue navigating where He's leading me. I don't know 100% where He's leading me, but I'm learning a lot about trust this year. And so that's kind of where I'm at as far as my college career.
And people might find it interesting to know that Hannah and Abby have been friends basically since they could walk, probably something like that. So they've been friends for a long time. So before we get into talking about the new and good things that God is doing in each of your lives, I'd just like your perspective on how the whole coronavirus thing has affected you and maybe people in your generation, how you perceive others are viewing this. And James or Hannah, either one of you, would you like to start with that?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it definitely impacted us. We're definitely blessed that it didn't kind of negatively impact us as much as it could have. So since I worked at Liberty, probably for the last month or 2 months that I worked there, so I guess March and April, I worked from home, which was a blessing to be able to do so. And then really the biggest way that it impacted us would have been the way that we had to leave Lynchburg. So we were planning on staying in Lynchburg much longer so we could be there for his graduation, so we could kind of be there with all of our friends leaving. And then when the coronavirus happened, kind of all of those plans really crumbled and changed pretty drastically. We went from staying for most of May to having to leave and end my job at the end of April, so that we could move down here to Tennessee to be with Hannah's family, so that we could begin to prepare for what's next. So it's definitely a very hard adjustment for us, a very quick transition. We didn't get to see many people before we got to leave. We got to see really our immediate friend group. But outside of that, we didn't get to say goodbye to our church family, which was pretty difficult. We have been able to, we're still doing like video small group. So it's been a huge blessing of ours to be able to still be a part of that every week. That'll be coming to an end pretty soon here, but it's certainly been life-giving while we've been here. But yeah, that's, I think, how it's affected us. And then just travel plans, I'd say.
Yeah, and I was in my final semester of school, which was student teaching. So I had gotten placed with a really great teacher and really fun 5th grade class. And so it was hard to not be able to say goodbye to them and finish out the semester kind of the way that I had imagined it for 5 years. So that was definitely difficult too. But we knew in that moment that no matter what, God was in control, and it didn't come as a surprise to Him. And even when it was difficult for us to say goodbye to people or not be able to say goodbye to people and not get to kind of do those things in Lynchburg that meant a lot to us one last time, we still knew that what God had for us in this like next season, and even right now in the preparation for that, was still so good and His will all along. So.
And how do you think other people that are your friends in your age or friend group, how do you think they have perceived this whole thing? Has there been a lot of fear? Do you think people are responding in faith, or a lot of uncertainty? What is your perception of that?
I feel like we've seen a mixture of both. Like there's definitely the people who are very fearful, and I think a lot of that comes from having like family in the places where the disease was very I guess like detrimental, like in New York City and things like that. Because at Liberty, you meet people from all over the place. So there were definitely people who were fearful of losing family and who even were affected by the virus. But I feel like a lot of people were able to kind of face it like head on. And I think a lot of people were encouraged because of where we were at in Lynchburg. Like, we did have such a good community. And I know, like, we had friends who were being very, very careful, and were kind of on the more fearful side of it. But as things kind of progressed, they were able to kind of step back from that fear and live more on the faith side of things. And I don't think it's necessarily side by side. I think you experience both of those together, and that's part of the process of walking through it. But that was definitely something we saw.
No, I think for everybody it was a hard adjustment, because it kind of came as like a blanket or a rug being pulled out from everybody's feet, where all of a sudden everything that we thought was pretty normal, things you can't expect to finish up a spring semester or this season of spring and entering into summer and graduation, all these things we come to expect, all of a sudden we're not anymore. And so I think that was the biggest thing, where students transitioning from a moment of being at college with their friends, doing what they love, studying in classrooms, what they want to do, to now all of a sudden, having to move home, having to not have a lot of those experiences, not be with their friends. Some people like that, yeah.
Abby, how would you say this has affected you and the friends that you have, maybe in different sectors of the country even?
Yeah, I'll speak for my community that I was with. I had classmates in Ireland who were from all different states. There were about 20 of us, and I think we're from almost all different states. And then I'll also speak to the Milligan community, just what I've been able to see from where I'm at. But whenever everything happened in Northern Ireland, we were told we were going to be sent home, and nothing was really shut down there. So I don't really think there was an immediate fear of necessarily the virus or getting the virus, though that did end up being an issue. My roommate got very sick whenever she was on her way home, flying home. She sat next to a woman from Italy, and we think it was the coronavirus, but she was never able to be tested. And so just realizing that in hindsight, but at the time, I know that I had friends who were there and just were dealing with a lot of the stress of, in a sense, we felt like we were deported because we had to get out of the country, and there were not that many flights. And so I really felt like I had just huge grace and a huge blessing in having you all there to help me navigate the logistics side of getting home. And something I'd prayed for all semester was to be a carrier of peace and a source of joy. And that was something, like, very specifically, I felt like the Lord was telling me going to Northern Ireland, and I'd just been struggling with it and being really hard on myself. For times I wasn't able to walk in that. And then the last few days, once we found out we were being sent home, I really just out of nowhere felt like the Lord gave that to me, and I was able to just kind of be consistent for my classmates. And even coming home, a lot of my classmates and friends experienced some bitterness and some anger of just, it was such an amazing experience, and we were having such an amazing time. And I made some genuine friends and had a lot of healing as far as community in that space. And so I'm fairly confident that sometime in my life I can make it back to Northern Ireland. But the fact that I'll never be with that community again was probably the hardest part of coming home. But for me, again, I was very fortunate. A lot of my classmates in coming home were having this other issue of not all of them had planned to live at home again. Not all of them really had the best home situations. And so I guess I kind of had to process some fear, not really of the virus, but of their well-being, of their spiritual well-being, their emotional well-being, and just people, like, a lot of them had planned to go straight to summer jobs and not live for a month or two at home. And so I've been able to be here and really just enjoy beautiful weather, enjoy your all's hospitality and welcoming me home. And so, I really feel like even just coming home, I think the hardest thing I struggled with is I had switched to this pace and this like social level, and I've been living with a bunch of people and in new environments and going on adventures too. I was just home, like we were CDC quarantined for 2 weeks, and that could have been really hard, but I actually felt like it was a very sweet time to kind of just do things slowly, do things simply, and that's continued a little longer than I thought it would have. But even I think yesterday I sat in the driveway for an hour and just ate a popsicle and I felt like a kid. And I've been doing other stuff, I promise, but it's been kind of nice to have just the simple joy and be reminded of childlike joy in that. As far as Milligan community goes, I've tried to reach out and kind of just connect with people there and see what the needs are. And I would say anxiety and depression are two of the biggest challenges in that community. I think in the college community in general, in our age group, that's just huge. And so I really knew that that would be a big issue, that this would be a time where there could be really some war waged in the areas of emotional health. And so that was a big thing of coming home. And then also Milligan is a very small Christian school, and we're known for our community. And so in some ways it was an identity crisis of this is the experience that we signed up for, was to not only learn things in our field and our degree, but also to jump into this community together. And I know that I personally need discussion. I thrive in discussion, and that's just hard to do in an online class and a Zoom class. And so I've seen a lot of fruit of people having to rely on the Lord for their peace, for their comfort, of people being taught how to rest, being taught how to just live simply and not have to have their schedules to rely on. And for me personally, I tend to be very proactive in doing a lot of things. And I've really enjoyed kind of just the simpleness of being home. But I've also not had a lot of, I guess, logistical fears to deal with. And so I'm really grateful in that way.
Yeah, how have the three of you seen some positive things during this time period? For example, today I was talking with a lady who was out of her job for about 6 weeks. She's back at work now, but she said it was really a great time. She had a wonderful time with family, and she drew closer to the Lord, and she just felt really blessed. What positive things have you seen during this time period?
I definitely agree with that. I think like there has been loss in some ways, but there's also been great growth in other ways, and things that like I know that I took for granted. Like while James was still working at home, I was able to read a lot and kind of like invest in things that like I was passionate about but hadn't had time before to really commit to. And like as James finished up his job, he was more able to kind of delve into those things himself as well. And also just being with our families. Like I know we had planned to stay in Lynchburg through May and then spend the rest of our summer with our families before we leave. But it's been really refreshing to be able to spend more time than we thought with our families and get to experience that. And I think it's also allowed for some really good conversations, whether it's between us or with parents or other adults or even like other college students our age. It's allowed us to really kind of evaluate, I guess, like what we put value in and what is meaningful in our lives. And I think they're conversations that otherwise would have been kind of awkward to approach in some situations, but they've been made very, I guess, prominent because of the way that the world is right now. And also just like more time to be reading scripture and studying scripture and not feeling pressured to like accomplish it within a certain time that we've allotted for our quiet time or something like that. To actually have time to dig into it more has been really needed, especially in my life. So
For myself, one of the biggest positives that I've seen, and it was actually a big thing that I learned a lot even before the coronavirus and everything happened with that, was the idea of rest, and then also just like Sabbath rest as well. And so from teachers like John Mark Comer and other pastors that have been teaching a lot on rest well before the coronavirus, it was cool to see how all of a sudden everything that we've been learning, everything that I had been learning, was all of a sudden kind of what life was now. And so it's been a huge blessing to be able to rest, to be able to slow down, and all of a sudden we're not, able to do the things that we normally would do or normally want to do. And it kind of makes us all question, is what we're doing, is everything that we're doing, is it worth it if we're not able to rest? And so kind of as well, the idea of simplicity with life, is it, do we have to be doing everything? I don't think that we do. I think that's what the coronavirus has kind of done, is it has made us all think, is, what we're doing before this, is it what we have to do? So that's kind of what I've learned, and one of the positives in my own life, along with what Hannah had mentioned of kind of like spiritual disciplines, more time to really invest into that, since there aren't, any kind of things pulling at our schedules and things like that.
I would say at the beginning, I actually kind of struggled with holding the positive side in tension with the tragedy of everything that's happening. And I personally kind of enjoyed the quarantine, and this season was something that I felt like I was able to adjust to and actually thrive in a lot of ways, and be renewed by, but that wasn't the case for everybody. And so in talking to friends, I really had to kind of struggle to be sensitive to, it's a very unifying experience, especially as college students being taken out of our norm. We're all figuring out life in different locations and situations, but it's also impacting everybody in such unique ways. And so leaving space for that has been a little bit of a challenge. But some of the positives that I've experienced are creatively. I feel like there's a lot of things that the Lord's called me to creatively that I generally don't take time to actually obey or walk in or follow. And so that's been cool to see. Even a lot of friends of mine just kind of encouraging, reminding to take advantage of this season, of this time, to invest in learning creative skills and learning music and art and writing, or all these different things that are possibilities now. I know a lot of people picked up new hobbies, and that's just kind of cool to see inspiration happening, and listen to so many podcasts. And so that's been fun. But I listened to one about boredom, and how boredom is almost like a necessary thing for ingenuity and creativity. And so I've enjoyed just seeing what people are producing and coming up with. But also this year was supposed to be just a new adventure, like a very big year for me. So I was in Northern Ireland, and then I was supposed to be home for just a few weeks and head out to Colorado Springs, which I'm still able to do here in a couple weeks, but it was going to be very, very quick turnaround. And I've lived in the Tri-Cities my whole life. Milligan is still in the Tri-Cities, and I've never really been somebody who's like attached to home, but it's still been a lot of familiarity, a lot of ability to control where I'm at, what I'm doing. And so that was going to be just like a very quick, like going from new community to new community, new location to new location. And I feel like I've had so much time in between to process and prepare. And in some ways, it's been a very quiet time. Like I feel like the Lord could be just speaking and teaching me and all these different ways. Like I have so much time to listen. But it's been a lot more sweeter than that, of just kind of sitting with him and learning to, again, to trust. I think that's been a challenge, has been with time comes just the opportunity to let my thoughts run, and especially wondering like exactly how God's going to use me, or wondering exactly what direction I should go in the future has been a big thing on my mind for a long time, of wanting to plan that out. And so I think that was something I struggled with at first, of the temptation to just start a spreadsheet and research all the possibilities and look into master's degrees and just be looking to the next thing. But that's been a big thing. The Lord has just given me peace to stop and to let go of that, and to not necessarily be like checking myself and checking my growth, and kind of getting rid of the performance of I need to be learning this and doing this, but just kind of sitting with the Lord in that sweetness.
Well, all three of you have adventures ahead. Abby mentioned one coming up for her. James and Hannah, why don't you tell us your big adventure that's on the horizon?
Yeah, so James and I, for those of you guys that we've not been able to talk to yet, we just actually accepted positions as missionaries with an organization in Mexico. So we will be moving at the beginning of August to go and serve with them. So I'll be a kindergarten teacher in their school. Their schools are for the local kids in a little town in Mexico. And do you want to talk about what you'll do?
Yeah, I'll be a campus pastor, and so for them, so my main goal for their school in their organization is called Global Education Ministries. Will be the main responsibility will be to lead the weekly chapels that they have for their students, and then also to develop kind of like a youth ministry within the school to help provide a community for students that are following Jesus, since the majority of them that come to the school do not, for them to kind of meet, interact with one another, and be poured into, as well as to connect them and their families with several of the Bible-believing churches that the school down there is connected with. So,
Now, is this a Christian school reaching out to the community? Is that set up?
yeah. So they're what they call themselves is a gospel-saturated school. They are a Christian school, and the reason for that verbiage is they want the gospel to saturate everything that they do, whether it's from their teaching to their discipline, to how they build relationships with students, to how they build relationships with families and even interact with the community, which has certainly been something that they've been able to do. They were affected just kind of like everybody else was by the coronavirus, but they've been able to provide a lot of tangible things like food and water and things like that to those in the community of each of their schools.
And what part of Mexico is this in?
So we'll be in Puerto Escondido. It's in Oaxaca. So Oaxaca's the poorest state of Mexico, but it's down towards the south. So it's kind of as Mexico is curving under. Yeah, that's where it'll be.
And how did you end up going with this organization and choosing to go to Mexico and so forth?
Yeah, so it's kind of a little bit of a crazy story, but I had kind of felt like the Lord was leading me into mission work from a pretty young age, and had told my parents, and like most parents, they were not super excited. And then James had kind of had a similar experience, and we connected with a ministry. When I was at Liberty, I met a guy who was a recruiter for actually the ministry that Miss Lori Vaughn, who used to be the children's minister at Celebration, works with. And we got to know them pretty well and thought we'd be working with them at one of their schools. And then they actually redistributed staff and didn't have a place for James anymore. So we were praying about it a lot and kind of thought we'd be coming back to this area to work for a little while. But I don't know, God just kind of gave us unrest in our spirit about it. And we were kind of confused because we knew we had family and such like valued friends and relationships here, and we were kind of looking forward to that, but we just knew that that wasn't what God had for us right now. And through prayer and waiting, the guy from the other organization actually contacted us and connected us with this ministry that we're going with now, and we got to talk to them and meet them and hear about kind of I guess like their ministry and how they value people and what they're really looking to do, and the vision that God has given them for where they're going forward. And we kind of realized just how much like our passions and desires aligned with them, and just prayed about it a lot, and God gave us so much peace. And there were so many small things that God has allowed to just line up and affirm that in us, whether it's through relationships or like we knew people that were working with the ministry that we had no idea were working with the ministry, and just like their encouragement and love and support going forward in this has been really affirming that this is where God's leading us right now.
And how long is your commitment in Mexico?
Yeah, so it's a 2-year commitment that we've signed. So they have several missionaries that have done their 2 years. They have several missionaries that have been there for quite a while. So we're certainly excited to join them coming up in August.
And how's your Spanish training coming along?
I'd say I'm relatively proficient.
Yeah, I'm not so proficient, but luckily we have Spanish classes when we get down there that they help connect us with tutors and things like that. So we'll learn on the go.
Yeah, so this time next year, you'll be so fluent, we won't even know whether that's your native language or not.
Hopefully.
See.
But that is part of the missionary process, is learning the local language. I know other missionaries that have been associated with Celebration who've had to learn multiple languages as they've been moved to different parts of the world. So it is a pretty significant undertaking in that regard.
Yeah.
I'll come back to you more. We'll talk more about missions. But Abby, you have a new adventure that you alluded to coming up this summer. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was looking at internships a while back and found one at Focus on the Family, and wasn't really sure if that was something I should apply for or not, but had a lot of peace about it and ended up getting an internship in marketing operations. And so I was actually supposed to leave on this past Tuesday, but they postponed 2 weeks. And so here in just another week and a half or two, I'll be driving out with my mom to Colorado Springs, and I'll be there until August. And so it's very much an intern program. So I will be contributing and serving at Focus on the Family, but also hopefully with a cohort of interns. I think they haven't necessarily said this, but the way that they're approaching it is very much like another branch of their ministry, and investing in each of us individually with mentorship and with opportunity. And so I'm very grateful. It's another crazy adventure. There's just been a lot of little things ever since finding out that I had this opportunity that have given me a lot of excitement and peace heading toward it, but it'll be definitely something new.
Now, for those who might not be familiar, Focus on the Family is a ministry that's been around for a little over 40 years and historically have done exactly what the name indicates. They've focused on helping families in a variety of ways, whether it's marital relationships or parenting, all those types of things. In fact, Hetty Gritz, who serves at our church, has been a guest on the Focus on the Family radio program at least once, maybe even a couple of times. And of course, they have guests from all over the world who are experts in marriage and family and so forth. And so you'll be there for the summer, but you're working in the marketing area. And of course, now people may also not know that Focus on the Family, their primary outreach is through radio, but also online. They provide a lot of resources. And what are the things that the marketing area does, as far as you know at this point, Abby?
Well, this will be part of the challenge for me. I have had marketing internships before where I've done social media or blogs or image work or that sort of thing. But actually, this is marketing operations. So I'll be kind of working the behind the scenes of what the marketing projects are doing. So it's very much about logistics and flow and tying in. Focus has a lot of different branches, from reaching out to families to kids to just missions in lots of different areas that affect the family or the church. And so marketing operations is I guess the department that kind of ties together what everybody else is doing, makes sure that everything is working efficiently, and that it's all kind of matching the general image. So it'll be a very different type of position than I've been. It will be less on the creative side and more on the logistics, technical side. But I'm excited for the challenge and to just test out some new skills and learn some new skills as well.
Yeah, Hannah and James, when you think about becoming missionaries and going to a different part of the world, of course, only been married a year approximately. What are the things that excite you? And maybe what are the things that concern you in this new adventure?
Yeah, I think for, let's see, for myself, I think I'm most excited about, one, the job opportunity, what we get to do. For myself, getting to study ministry for undergrad, getting to serve for several years at a camp, and serve in a church in their youth ministry, and really getting to study it in grad school as well. I think it's been something that I've just wanted to do. This past year, while we were married, I wasn't really able to do that where we were at, which was something that was definitely not what I wanted. It was difficult. And so for me, I'm just excited to do it. I'm excited to kind of start something brand new, a little nervous about that as well. They used to have a youth ministry there, but because it was just kind of a shared responsibility, eventually it just kind of faded away. So I think it's both an excitement and something I'm a little nervous about, is starting something from the ground up in a completely different culture. And things that work and are effective in America aren't necessarily effective in Mexico. And so being flexible, being moldable, being willing to learn will be an experience in and of itself. And then for Hannah and I, one thing that we love and I loved is when we lived in Lynchburg, just kind of experiencing Lynchburg, a new place that we'd been before, but it was new to us as a couple, as a married couple. And so getting to experience Mexico together, Puerto Escondido together, getting to build those relationships. We talked with a lot of the people that we'll be serving with for several months now. And I think at this point, I just want to see them and be with them in person.
I know it's easy to have, I guess in a weird way, kind of a romanticized view of missions work as you read, like whether it's biographies of people like Jim and Elizabeth Elliot, or just like stories from people who come and share. I think it's easy to have this idealized view. And I know that when we're living in it every day, it's not going to be like that. And even the short-term trips that we've both gotten to experience in other countries, even in other Latin American countries, are going to be entirely different from what we're living in every day. So I think I'm extremely excited to learn about the culture and have the opportunity to teach. And like I had said, I get to teach kindergarten, which has been my desire from the very beginning because I love the little ones. So I'm extremely excited about that, and so excited to be able to do it with someone that has the same desires and the same passions. And as we continue to grow our marriage, to do that. But I also know that there's going to be so many challenges that we can't even imagine right now. But I'm excited for the growth that the Lord's going to bring through that. And we think sometimes that we're going to help those people, but I know that in reality, they're going to be teaching us so much more than what we can imagine right now. I think another kind of fear of mine is this will be my first year teaching, and in every other like practicum or student teaching, things like that, I kind of realize piece by piece that I know so little about having my own classroom or creating a curriculum or teaching students. And it's kind of nerve-wracking to think that the kids I'll be teaching only speak Spanish. So there's another barrier that comes with teaching kindergarten in and of itself. So I know that there's going to be a lot of places where the Lord's going to have to fill in for my shortcomings and my lack of knowledge, but I know that he's been so faithful to do that before, and I trust that he's going to be faithful to do that right now, especially as he has so evidently in our lives led us to this point. And I'm honestly just excited to see him continue fulfilling promises and being faithful in these things.
Now, having been a teacher for a good part of my life, I know that the first year of teaching is the hardest.
Yes.
or the first year of teaching new courses that you haven't taught before, that can be hard. So you get both of those all at the start,
Yes.
your first time out. So that'll be a challenge, but it'll be good. But it will get a little easier your second time around.
Mm-hmm.
I also, in talking with the various missionaries that the church has supported, I mean, we support a lot now, we have in the past, and I think most of those would say it's been extraordinarily good, a great blessing, but harder than they anticipated.
Mm.
That I think of one, I won't mention the name, but one family that moved to an African country some years ago. And they found the transition a lot harder than anticipated, but the ministry they were involved in was very fruitful.
Mhm.
So it was a blessing, but it wasn't easy. And so I'm sure you've thought of that, but then actually getting your feet on the ground and living it will be a little different challenge. Probably draw you closer together as a couple, though, I think. Abby, what are the points of excitement you have about going to work for Focus on the Family this summer?
Points of excitement are lots. It's a huge opportunity. It's an organization that I've grown up with and had just the opportunity to benefit from for many years. And so to see kind of the behind the scenes of how that works, I think is going to be such an honor to get to kind of invest back into something that invested in me as a child. And so I'm very excited for that and very excited just for the new community, for the new connections and just the people who are walking in their calling, the people who are pursuing the Lord in a more, it's definitely like a large, somewhat corporate setting. And so that's something I've been kind of challenged by in being a business major is I want to be with people and I want to be just loving the Lord. And I have a big heart for worship and expression and trying to figure out how the administrative skills that I've been learning fits into all of that is kind of something that I'm still waiting to see. And so I believe it'll be really just exciting to be in an environment where there's people who genuinely love the Lord and are genuinely pursuing that. From the people that I've talked to, from my boss that I got to meet just over the phone and over Zoom, they're just very encouraging people. It seems like a very healthy environment. So I would say I'm really, really excited to see how they handle that, how they really have developed a heart to serve. And it's a behind the scenes role. It's not necessarily direct contact with people, with community, with ministry. And I've kind of said I want to go toward nonprofit, but I know that I love to just be with people and to be able to communicate with people. Even though I'm not always the most outgoing person, I feel like I like to be able to translate things for people to understand and grasp. And that won't necessarily be how I am functioning in this as far as reaching out to ministry, but reaching internally and seeing how communication works, how it functions on a larger scale. I think it's going to be really important.
Yeah, I mean, now you mentioned that mom is driving out to Colorado with you, but she's not staying out there. She's flying home. So
No.
you have some concerns what about going out there?
Could you say that again?
You have some concerns about going to Colorado for the summer.
Yeah. In some ways, I, for a while, was kind of struggling with like almost a survivor's guilt of still having this opportunity and having this internship. I don't know the percentage, but I would guess maybe 70% of my peers and friends have had their summer opportunities changed or canceled. And all I have is a 2-week postponement. So that is a little bit of a concern still that even though I'm going, there's going to be some things that are different. And so there's 30 interns, but we can't be in groups more than 10. And so a lot of the community parts of that are going to look different. They said our orientation will still be on Zoom. We have to wear masks at our desk. And just kind of the apprehension that comes with that. I'm not really that concerned about the virus. It's pretty calm in that area and where I'm at right now too. But just being considerate of how that's going to affect how community works is something that I'm maybe a little bit concerned about. And then also, I don't always enjoy my over detailed side of myself. And so I'm wanting to make sure that that's submitted to the Lord and that in all my plans, that how I'm learning to use my administrative skills is in a way that's still honoring, that's patient, that's kind, that's humble. And so just kind of figuring out in that setting how I'll react is something that I've been praying about.
Now, James and Hannah, do you know if the coronavirus has had much impact in the area where you'll be serving in Mexico?
Yeah, so like we had mentioned, it's a smaller town. There, the area where we will be is it's actually a beach town. So there's 3 beaches, and the 2 beaches south of us have a decent amount of tourism. And then the beach that we'll be at is called the Mexican Beach. That's what they refer to it as, because it's where the locals all live. So we had heard, I guess, back in March when things kind of started changing here, and then we're into April, that they were not being affected necessarily by the virus itself, but more just the travel bans and stuff. So where we will be, the people live for the majority in poverty, but they get their income from tourism. So a lot of that has been affected by people not being able to participate in that and are not coming to the area. So a lot of people are losing their income. So it's not been as much about the sicknesses as it has been about a loss of income and kind of trying to find food for family and things like that. And as James had mentioned, they've been able to provide food and water for the locals and in the community that are struggling because of the people in the States that are continuing to give and things like that. But we know that they had some missionaries who had come to the States for recruitment events like college job fairs and things like that, who have actually gotten stuck here because they can't get returning flights to Mexico. So some of them are still in the States. I think the ministry's biggest impact has been that they were hoping to hire about 17 new people to work with the organization for next year. And because of the job fairs and things like that being canceled, they've not been able to hire as many people as they were hoping because they're not able to go and talk to people as much. So
What do you think the Lord is teaching you during this season? When I say season, I'm talking the last, say, few years, in preparing you to go and do missions work. What has He been doing in your heart? What is He doing in your hearts right now?
I think for myself, the last couple of years, I've been learning a lot of just what it means to find refuge in Him. And I think that translates to a lot of different parts of my life and our lives as well, regardless where we're at, regardless of what's going on. Really, no circumstances impact the fact that we can find refuge in the Lord. We can find peace in that. We can find joy in the fact that we can go to Him and He's around us. We have the Spirit. And so as that kind of relates to missions work, going back of, how exciting the adjustment to go is, but also how kind of big and scary it is to go and adjust and hard. Having that at the forefront of our minds is that regardless of where we are, whether we're here and we're loving life and there's no coronavirus, or we're in Mexico in a brand new place with brand new people, with food and water and a language that, we're not used to or not proficient in, some of us. We can find refuge and we can find peace. And that is the kind of the steady thing that we can kind of lean on and trust in.
I know for myself, I've found a lot of surrender in being just like where God wants me to be and who He designed me to be, kind of falling into line with what He's calling me to. I know a big part of that has been whether it's like me desiring to control, as it kind of was when like I wanted to go with this certain organization to this country that I really admired someone who had gone with them before, and kind of walk in those footsteps. But seeing God kind of relinquish the control that I thought I had in my own life and bring something that's so great and so perfect and falls right in line with what He has for us. I've seen a lot of like surrender in that and processing through emotions, which is not something that I've always been the best at. And God teaching me that it's okay to feel and to live in these things, and that we can't experience true joy if it's not for deep sorrow. And I think like a big part of that too is like seeing his faithfulness over and over again. And whether it's what I'm reading in scripture that continually points back to his faithfulness. Like I've just finished studying like through, I guess, like part of the New Testament with First and Second Kings and Old Testament with First and Second Kings and First and Second Chronicles, and reading about how even in rebellion, God was so faithful to protect and provide grace for his people and opportunity for them to find him over and over again and repent of their sins. And in the same way, God has provided so many places in my life where he's either made promises or given passions and desires, and he's provided a way for those things to come to fruition. And even in my own fear, when I try to control situations like that, he is so sovereign to take it away and do it in a way that I can bring glory to him, and just continue to not desire that control, because what good is it if I'm the one holding it? So.
You mentioned Lori Vaughn earlier. Lori had a big impact in Hannah's life and in Abby's life when you were very young. She was our children's ministry director at Celebration for quite a number of years. And then she went into full-time missions work in a Middle Eastern country. And I think she spent about 8 years there and just finished. She just returned to the United States very recently and is starting a new adventure herself. But we certainly can be thankful for the impact she's had on you and helping you formulate your view of Christ as a young person. Mm-hmm. Abby, what do you think the Lord's been showing you, teaching you in recent months, years, and preparing you to do in this coming summer?
Mm-hmm. I think that my time in college has been a time of a lot of growth, a time of spiritual ownership in a lot of ways, of knowing my identity, knowing my capability, and knowing where that comes from. But something that I've been learning a lot about is that God gives me his desires, that he's giving the desires of my heart. He's giving his desires and putting them in my heart. And just that process of surrendering, of submitting, and that process and knowing that his timing is correct. And so I think as I've grown with the Lord, as I've learned that I can hear the Lord, as I've found that there's more in the kingdom of God that I want to be a part of, kind of seeing that his dreams are way bigger than my own, and just trusting that he's planting in me just what I need for wherever he's leading me. I think that there's been a lot of process of taking ownership, of walking in boldness in just my own capability to know who I am in Christ and to walk in that way. There's a quote that I found about a year and a half ago that was pretty cool to me. And it said, from watching and wondering to watching and waiting to wondering and worrying to witnessing and worshiping the glory of God. And I think that's a continual process of just seeing that God's doing something and waiting for it to be my turn to step into that, wondering what that all could be, wondering what his plan is, wondering how big he really is, and then actually having the pleasure to step into and witness what it's like to be part of building his kingdom and what it's like to truly worship him. I think grace has been a big theme also in realizing that the Lord lets me love him. There's nothing that I have that is worthy enough to be laid on his altar, but he tells me that my worship is worthy and I don't have to reach his head. I just have to sit at his feet. I would say those are some big breakthrough moments of just things that I overthink a lot. I try and figure things out a lot. And those were moments where I heard those few things of he lets me love him, of he's giving me his desires, and just trying to kind of figure out the excitement of what all that means, of what walking in his spirit means, of what the Holy Spirit wants to do through me, and of what building his kingdom is going to be like. Because at this point, I have absolutely no clue.
It should be the case that we recognize God's hand upon us every day in a lot of ways. But somehow it seems that when you do take an adventure like you're going on, that you become more aware of those things. that you see his hand a little bit more clearly. In fact, one of the gentlemen at Celebration Church is Dr. David Stevens, who did medical missions work around the world. And he told me one of the things he misses about that was the necessity of living by faith. In other words, it's a little easier in this country not to always be walking in faith, but when you're in another country or an unusual environment, that sense of living by faith each day is much more clear. So I suspect that you'll see that in Mexico, and even Abby going this summer, she'll see some things along that line. We're sort of winding toward the end of our time of discussion. Some people who are learning maybe through this program this evening for the first time about what you're doing, James and Hannah, they might want to support you. I'm going to assume that the best way, based on what we're doing tonight, would be for them to contact Celebration Church, and Celebration Church can give them your information, give them a phone number or email address, and then they can get in touch with you if they'd like to support you in some way as you go on this journey. Because like all missionaries, you have to raise support, I'm sure. And your plan then, you said, was to depart August the 1st, is it, or around that time?
Yep, it's close to August.
Yeah.
Now, are there any other things you'd like to share with us to sort of wrap up and let people know about what's coming forward?
I would say just to continue to be in prayer over what we're doing, as we're kind of realizing the sacrifice day by day, that whether it's relationship with people or things like that, and trusting that God is continuing to be faithful in that, and then continuing to support Raise and for the ministry that they're trying to teach as best as they can, but with where they are and their circumstances, teaching online is not as I guess fluid, I guess, as it is in the States. But I mean, I know in the States teachers are struggling with that as well, but just as they're trying to make those adjustments and adapt to that and continue to finish the year well, and just for us to, I guess, continue in that growth and perseverance and trust in what the Lord has for us, but also our time with our families, that it'll be refreshing and sweet.
And so let me mention again, if you would be interested in supporting James and Hannah, just contact the church office. Just call 323-3969 or send an email to office@cctri.org, and we'll provide you with their contact information, and you can get involved in supporting them. Abby, any last things you'd like to share with us as you're thinking about your journey starting here in just a few days?
Yeah, well, I'd love prayers for protection and just wisdom, and even how this time has reminded me of the sweetness of rest, of the sweetness of space, and how the Lord can fill that. And so, going into new adventures, going into new environments and exciting things, I'm praying for wisdom and for clarity on how much to take advantage of the opportunities and get involved in all these different things, and how much to just kind of hold on to what this season has been. And so I would say that's a big thing. And then I'm just praying for joy. It's a big adventure. I think that God's plans for me are just a big adventure, and I want to walk in the joy of that and not the worry of that. And so I'm excited for where He's taking me. I know that He has a plan. I know that this is where He's led me. And so I know it's going to be wonderful, but I want to have enough trust to just enjoy that process with Him.
It's probably easier for you guys to walk in the joy of your adventures, and a little harder for your parents to avoid the worry of the adventure side.
Perhaps.
We try not to, but nonetheless, it's a little bit of a challenge. Well, I really appreciate you guys being with us this evening. I think it's very interesting what you're doing, and the boldness that you have and the faith that you have to step out, take risks, do things differently. And two, I'm thankful, as I know Hannah's parents would be, and that somehow Celebration gave you a foundation for understanding the Lord and walking with Him, and then being willing to step out and be involved in the ministries that He has laid out before you. And then I want to say one other thing, and that's just about Celebration Church, that we are doing online services this coming weekend, but this will be the last weekend. That then on the weekend of June 6th and 7th, we're going to reopen We'll have a Saturday night service at 6:30, one service on Sunday at 9:30 the first weekend. Now we're going to add in current the second weekend. We may add another service just after that, but the very first weekend there'll only be the 9:30 service. There will not be children's ministry, and there will not be a nursery. We will not be serving coffee. So Hannah, make sure to tell your mom to bring her own coffee. I know that's
I will.
important to her, but that's important to a lot of people, so they need to bring it with them. But things will be a little different. And if you're excited about getting back together and you're so ready for it, that's wonderful. We're looking forward to seeing people. But I know a lot of people are a little hesitant. And so if you're not so sure, maybe you want to wait a week and just sort of see how things unfold. And then I know some people need to be extra cautious because they're in the more vulnerable categories. And so if you're in that situation, I don't want people to feel pressured. I don't want you to feel like it's some kind of obligation. The church is opening and now I have to be there. I want you to come when you feel comfortable and peaceful about doing so. Of course, we're excited about worshiping together. I think it's going to be a great experience just to be side by side with people, or at least fairly close to people, and worship with them again. I think that's what I've missed the most is corporate worship. And so again, that's the first weekend of June. We look forward to seeing you then. And because we're reopening, I'm not going to do Wise Up next week. I may do Wise Up periodically in the future, but it's not going to be a weekly thing as it has been during the time that we've been closed. But we'll let you know when it's going to be available again at different times in the future. And I do want to say thank you to Louis Britz and to Hetty Britz, who've done Wise Up for the last 2 weeks and done a great job with that. Of course, they always do a good job with the things that they're involved in. And again, thank you again to James and Hannah and to Abby. And for those of you who don't know, I am considering growing a man bun because I'm really impressed with James's, and I don't know if I can accomplish it, but well, at least I can dream about it. At least I can dream about it. But again, thank you for being with us this evening. Love you guys. And for the rest of you, have a blessed evening.